In the context of agile development, again, prioritization plays a very, very, very important role, because if you do not, you have got short time limits, right? You've got short cycles of, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks to develop a feature. And within such a short time, you need to really focus all your energies, your resources, your money, your effort and time to build that feature. So it's important that you actually kind of give the best shot in terms of your importance and the urgency for the right feature to be developed. If you go in the wrong way, then it's easy to actually correct and take a step back. But then why do you want to do that? So prioritization plays a very, very significant role in the agile development. So how do you do this? So we were having a brief look at this in the context of the agile course the last week. So here we talk about the forward traceability. So here we're dictated by the business needs. The business would actually tell you what you would need to do as a team, as a development team. And then the system, the product would actually be completed and then be delivered. So what you have as a product is actually kind of traced back to the business in terms of backward traceability. So we are trying to constantly check whether this is what the business needs, whether this is what the customer really requires, and whether we are meeting the expectations and the objectives of them. So Agile gives you that constant loop, the continuous development, continuous delivery, continuous integration. So we are trying to continuously engage with the customers and the team, and we actually have a product that is really, really addressing the needs of the people, of the customers and the business. So there is a forward traceability, and then there's a backward traceability. This goes on and on. This is a continuous loop of checking PDCA. Yesterday we had to look at that. The PDCA is plan, do, check, act. Continuously you do that every cycle, every sprint. It's not like a year or 2 years. So the product backlog actually kind of gives you the roadmap in terms of where you want to go. And then from there on, from the product backlog, depending on the product backlog, you come up with the releases. So we were talking about yesterday, the minor release and the major release, right? A major release perhaps every 6 months, like how Apple or Google does. And then minor releases are basically like every month, 2 months, depending on whether you're fixing the defects, or you're trying to make some changes to the existing features, or you're trying to update, or you're just trying to update based on some of the viruses or some security features or things like this. Very simple tweaks, or it could be just a color of something. So these could be small little things. So these things can actually be done and packaged and delivered quicker. Like in the context of an agile product development, it could be done perhaps in weeks, in two weeks, or every 3 months, or every month you can do that. But if you want to really come up with a big, really feature that is adding a lot of value to the product, and if you want to really come up with a newer version completely of the product, like what Apple was, just yesterday they released the iPhone 12. For some, it could be just as good as the iPhone 11 in the context of what it's trying to offer. But then for some others, they actually see that as a significant step, because they're using the different kind of processor, which is done by Apple based on the 5 nanometers and all that stuff. So let's not talk about it. But essentially what they're saying is this is completely different in terms of how it is built and what it can do, the wonders inside, right? So they have delivered that as a new product altogether, iPhone 12, and they packaged it, and they're doing a big launch. Whereas other things, they could actually kind of do that every month. You can actually say, hey, by the way, it's iOS 14.1.3 is done, update ready. 14.1.5 update ready. Would you like to install? So essentially what that means is that those are the minor releases, and the big ones like 14 is a big one. iOS 15 is a big one. iOS 16 is a big one. That happens every now and then. So that again is a release strategy. So we'll talk about it again later. And then iteration is basically within this release, how many sprints do you need to get to that release? So you've got let's say, major release of 6 months. Every 6 months, you got to have a major release, a new product, iPhone 12, for instance. If you want to deliver iPhone 12 as a new product by, let's say, yesterday, 14th of October or 13th of October, what you need to do is basically, you need to step back and say, what are the things that you need to achieve from there? So how many sprints do you need to actually achieve those feature changes or builds or technology aspects or architectural elements? So you need to work backwards and you need to see how many iterations do you need. So how many sprints do you need? How many 3-week cycles do you need to get to that? So perhaps let's say roughly about 5 sprints, 5 times 3 weeks is what you need to complete some of the features. And that's why you need to have 5 iterations. So basically you can see that this is the iterative development. Iterative as in you actually can go back to the previous one, and then it is also incremental. Incrementally you're delivering from one step to another step. One iteration you actually add another feature, third feature, fourth feature. So by the time you finish the 6th iteration, you actually have completed pretty much all the functionality required for us to push it out of the door and say, hey, you know what, we have got iPhone 12, right? So that's the kind of, again, we need to look at it from that aspect of prioritization. So again, prioritization plays a very, very, very important role here. So what features to be prioritized? What technologies do you want to prioritize? Which ones do you want to highlight? In terms of marketing, how you would like to bring and promote which feature? So all of these, you know, very, very important aspects in terms of prioritizing for not just the development team, but also for the architects of the product and for the product owners, product managers, for the business team, for the whole organization as a whole. That really plays a significant role. So we would try and have a look at some of the context in that context. If you really want to go further into this, how does it pan out? So we've taken this example yesterday of the e-commerce website and even the Apple iPhone 12 that was just released yesterday. So in that context, you've got that as a product backlog. So you just keep chucking everything in there. So the ability to have, like, let's say a 12 MP or even 3 lenses, a photo lens and a telephoto lens, and then there is a wide angle lens and then the normal one. Yeah. So you have this or an ultra wide angle, for example. This is what is chucked into the product backlog as I need to have this. But then when you have that as a feature, you can't just say that I'll go on and develop it. So that needs to be prioritized. So remember, it was not done in iPhone 1, iPhone 2, iPhone 3. It was done actually in iPhone 11 Pro or something like that. Why? Because they had to wait for it. So that's why that feature of having the wide angle, ultra wide angle telephoto, the 3 lenses on the back of the phone as cameras, you need to have that somewhere down in the bottom of the list. Until the iPhone 11 comes, that is not prioritized. So that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. So again, very important to know that it's not just the features, but it's also the defects that need to be put in the backlog. You're talking about defects, you're talking about tasks, you're talking about some technical aspects like having a big database, better processing power, better processing chip. They've gone from A13 bionic chip to something else, and so on and so forth. So we're talking about the advancements in the technology. We're putting changes and improvements. So in a sense, we're having all of these in the product backlog, right? We're chucking everything into it. So this grows over a period of time. When you start the product, it could be just like 10 items in the backlog. But 6 months down the line, you'll have 1,000. And 1 year down the line, you'll have like 3,000 items in the backlog. So whose job is it to actually kind of do the prioritization, when to do what out of these 3,000? It's the product managers. The product manager, the product owner, they would then create what they call as a release backlog. So take these 3,000 items, shortlist them, prioritization based on the Moscow. I'll tell you how it's done in the next slide. So the Moscow prioritization would help them get to the next level, and that's what they do in the release backlog. So in release 1, release 2, release 3, all they do at this point of time is to say that for the major release, iPhone 12 will have these, iPhone 13 will have this, iPhone 14 will have this. That's it. How they're going to put that and achieve that is not, that clear at that point of time. So then you have, that's what at this level, you still have release 1, feature 1, feature 2. So these will go into the release 1. This feature 3 is a big one. So it would go into the one release, which is later. And then release 3 could have either features, defects. So this is how they actually kind of prioritize at the release level. So we have got a major release, for instance. And then within each release, we've got what we call as iterations. So if you want to achieve this in the e-commerce functionality of having a shopping cart, I need to have a catalog, I need to have a payment processing of credit card, this functionality, at least these 3 have to be done by April 2021 is what the product manager and the business says. Now, working from that, what we do is we'll break it down and further into minor releases and sprints. Say that in sprint one, what we'll say that by November, I can do the catalog page. So we can see the items in there. And let's say by about January, I'll have the shopping cart basic functionality. By February, I'll complete the shopping cart with a checkout functionality. And then by April, I'll be able to accept the payments through credit card, right? So you are actually incrementally, you're saying that you can't really go with one big bang approach for the development team. So they take each of these releases, the features in the releases, and then what we call as epic. They break this feature into an epic. Epic is like a big story, a big feature. For example, we're talking about catalog. Show the catalog is one thing, right? So that's a big epic. Within that, you actually can break it down into how you can show. What does that mean? Showing the catalog mean? It means show an item, show item. Along with the item, you can actually show a list of items. So there should be a list of items. And when you click on an item, it should show the item details page. And when you see the details page, it should show the item photo. And then perhaps you also show the item title, description, blah, blah, blah. All of these are stories. So you're breaking that further down into the respective stories. And each of the story needs to be independent on its own. That should be staying autonomous on its own. So you don't have to depend on others. So you actually can say, take this one and then give it to the team, one team to develop, take this one, give it to another developer to develop. So in that way, by the end of, let's say, November, we'll be able to complete the catalog functionality and the feature. So by the end of, let's say, sprint 2, which is in late December, for example, we can also complete the checkout functionality. So you can create the shopping cart. You can add an item there that goes into the shopping cart, and that gets saved temporarily into the database. So this aspect is covered in the next sprint. So I hope you understood how the work gets really, chunked, kind of broken down into the respective units, depending on how big or how complicated it is. And then that gets done in terms of these iterations in Agile. Very, very important and very, very critical for the success of Agile development now. I mean, this is actually the foundation for Agile, how work gets done. And remember that we'll talk about that later, but once a piece of work gets into the sprint, it's the team which does the prioritization. They know, and they won't actually play around when they would be able to do what. Then the product manager has no say, but the product manager can have a say in terms of the backlog, what should come first and what should come next, because that's a business decision. But once it enters the sprint, the frozen period, we were talking about I'll just go to the next one. You see how it gets done. So in the context of epic, so I was telling you the example of, you've got an epic, which is actually kind of a big functionality, big story. And then you can break that epic down into separate set of user stories. So user management console, or you can say catalog in the e-commerce website. That gets broken down into user stories, show item page, and then view item details. And then the task could be to connect to the database to show, for example, to add the item into this. And then another task could be to store the photos of item. And a third task would be to show the video of the item in 360 degrees. So that needs a video. So all of these are tasks. So you can actually see that each epic can actually be further broken down into multiple stories, and each story could actually be further broken down into multiple tasks and subtasks. So these are all in technical. Some of them could be technical, some of them could be just functional aspect like CRUD, create, review, update, delete. So you can add item, you can delete item, you can change the item details, and you can just view the item. So this is basically something like a CRUD for the item level.